It was a silent May night in Pune, the kind of night where the city seemed to breathe in shadows. On Singhgad Road, two police constables were making their usual patrol when something unusual caught their eyes. A lone scooter zipped past them, balancing an oddly shaped sack on its front. The sack bulged in a way that sent a shiver down the officers' spines. They blew their whistles, signaling the driver to stop, but instead of slowing down, he accelerated into the darkness. That one decision sparked a chase that would unravel a tale of forbidden love, betrayal, and a murder so chilling that the city would never forget it. The officers pushed their bikes harder, refusing to lose sight of the suspicious rider. The man weaved through the empty lanes, but luck was not on his side. Within minutes, he was cornered. Breathless and nervous, he tried to resist questioning. When asked his name, he avoided answering, giving only half-hearted replies. His silence made the constables uneasy. Why was he so afraid to admit who he was? Finally, under pressure, he confessed. His name was Rakesh Kumar. That was when the officers pried open the sack strapped on the scooter. What they saw froze their blood. Inside lay the lifeless body of a woman, her legs dangling out, cold and still. The officers knew this was no ordinary case of crime. They immediately alerted their senior inspector, who rushed to the spot with urgency. As the body was transported to the hospital for examination, Rakesh sat slumped on the ground, trapped in his own fate. He tried to hide his guilt, but the horror in his eyes betrayed him. Soon the truth began to spill out. The woman was Babita, someone who had not only been part of his past, but had once been the very reason his heart had learned to dream. Their story, however, was no fairy tale. It was a slow-burning tragedy, one that began in a small village in Uttar Pradesh. Years ago, Rakesh and Babita were just children discovering love for the first time. He would often wait for her outside school, flashing shy smiles while she secretly looked forward to seeing him every morning. They grew up in the same village, sharing stolen glances, whispered promises, and quiet dreams. For them, love was pure, untouched by the harsh realities of the world. But their families thought otherwise. Society refused to accept their bond, and so, when the time came, their parents tore them apart. Rakesh was married off to another woman, while Babita was sent into a different household with a different husband. Their hearts were broken, but life forced them to move on, or at least pretend to. Time passed and fate played its cruel game. Despite being bound in different marriages, Rakesh and Babita's paths crossed again. That one meeting reignited the spark they thought had died long ago. They exchanged phone numbers, and soon late-night calls and secret messages became their lifeline. They began meeting in hidden corners, as though the universe itself conspired to bring them together again. Their hearts no longer cared for society or responsibility. They wanted only each other. What had once been innocent teenage love now transformed into a forbidden passion that grew stronger with every passing day. Their secret relationship, however, could not remain hidden forever. Both of their spouses grew suspicious. Fights erupted in their homes. But instead of ending things, Rakesh and Babita made a decision that would change everything. They chose to leave their partners and start anew. Leaving behind her husband, Babita moved to Pune with her young son, clinging to the hope of a fresh beginning. Rakesh too abandoned his wife and joined Babita in the city. Together they rented a small room, and for a while it seemed as though their love story had finally found a happy chapter. They even married, sealing their bond against the wishes of their families. At first, life in Pune was filled with laughter, stolen kisses, and the thrill of living together without hiding. Rakesh worked as a daily wage laborer, earning just enough to keep their household running. But slowly, cracks began to appear in their dream. Rakesh often sent money back home to his aging father, and Babita resented it. She argued that his duty was toward her and their little family, not toward the people he had supposedly left behind. Small arguments grew into daily battles, and the romance that once burned fiercely began to wither under the weight of reality. The fights became unbearable. Rakesh would often question his choices, wondering why he had left his wife for Babita. On the other hand, Babita had nowhere else to go. Her husband had abandoned her, and her parents had closed their doors forever. Trapped in a life that no longer felt like love, bitterness consumed her. She would curse Rakesh in fits of anger, accusing him of ruining her life. Their once beautiful love story now stood on the edge of destruction, hanging by threads of frustration and regret. And in Rakesh's mind, dark thoughts began to grow. The breaking point came on May 5, 2025. That evening, Rakesh's father called from the village asking for money. When Rakesh told Babita, she exploded in anger, refusing to let him send even a single rupee. The argument escalated into a storm of screaming and accusations. Rakesh, already tired and frustrated, lost control. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, he wrapped his hands around Babita's throat and squeezed. Her gasps for breath, her desperate struggle, it all ended within minutes. When he let go, she lay lifeless before him, her eyes still open, staring at him as if asking, "Why?" Their 8-year-old son had witnessed it all. His innocent world shattered in seconds. Shock settled in. Rakesh sat frozen, realizing the irreversible horror of what he had done. Panic soon replaced guilt. He needed to hide the crime, to erase the evidence. Taking his son out for dinner to create a false sense of normalcy, he tried to act calm. But inside, his mind was racing. Later that night, when his son slept, Rakesh stuffed Babita's body into a sack, wrapped it in a blanket, and borrowed a friend's scooter. Under the cover of night, he rode out, intending to dump the body in the hills near Katraj. He believed he could escape, that no one would ever know. But fate had other plans. For as Rakesh drove through the empty streets, the police were already out in force, conducting late-night patrols on the orders of Pune's commissioner. Their vigilance was what trapped him. The same sack that held his darkest secret was the very thing that betrayed him. Within hours, the love story that began with innocent glances in a village had ended in blood and handcuffs. Rakesh confessed to his crime, and the courts prepared to decide his punishment. But one question remained. How does love so pure turn into something so destructive? And could it be that sometimes the people we fight the hardest to be with are the very ones who lead us toward ruin? The year was 1988, in the heart of Rajasthan's Bundi district, where the dry winds carried with them both whispers of tradition and shadows of secrets. On a scorching June afternoon, the gates of Dablana police station suddenly shook with chaos. A man appeared out of nowhere, staggering forward with wild eyes and a blood-soaked sword in his hand. His white dhoti and shirt were drenched crimson. drops of blood falling steadily on the dusty ground. He shouted with a terrifying calmness, "I have killed them all. 6 of them, all with this very sword." The stunned officers froze. Was this man insane, or had he truly painted an entire household in blood? Assistant Sub-Inspector Durga Shankar and his men approached cautiously, their hands trembling as they tried to disarm him. The man seemed oddly compliant, setting the sword down after a long pause. His hands bore deep cuts, his eyes carried a strange mixture of rage and relief. Just as the officers secured him, news raced into the station. Nearby villagers were screaming that a horrific massacre had taken place. A woman and her 5 children had been butchered in their home. The officers exchanged horrified glances. Could this blood-stained man standing in front of them truly be the butcher of his own family? Within minutes, the police team rushed to the scene, their hearts pounding with dread. What awaited them was nothing short of a nightmare. Outside a small mud house lay the headless body of a woman, blood still flowing onto the parched earth. Her name was Kajod Bai, the villagers whispered, their voices trembling with fear. Scattered around the house were the lifeless bodies of 5 children, the oldest just 14, the youngest barely 2. The silence of death was broken only by the cries of horrified neighbors. The brutality was beyond comprehension. Even seasoned officers found themselves shaken to the core, their eyes refusing to believe what they were seeing. Among the villagers, a trembling woman stepped forward. She introduced herself as Ratna Bai, the deceased woman's sister-in-law. With tears streaming down her face, she revealed the name of the killer, her own brother-in-law, Bhairav Singh, Kajod Bai's husband. She claimed to have seen it all unfold with her own eyes. While returning from the well, she saw Kajod Bai lying headless, her children's blood splattered across the courtyard. And then she saw Bhairav still swinging his sword at his daughter, 7-year-old Hansa, slashing her tiny body mercilessly despite her screams. Ratna had begged him, fallen to her knees, pleaded for the child's life, but Bhairav had become a beast consumed by something far darker than anger. Other villagers confirmed her words. Bhairav's own brother, Jor Singh, admitted he had seen him roaming with the sword earlier that day. Even Jor's son repeated the same. The net of evidence tightened swiftly, but questions lingered. Why? Why would a man slaughter his wife and 5 innocent children? What demons had overtaken him that he could carry out such cruelty against his own blood? Back at the station, the man who had surrendered confirmed what everyone feared. He was indeed Bhairav Singh, and yes, he had committed the murders. But his reason for doing so was not born overnight. It was the result of suspicion, jealousy, and a poisoned mind. As the interrogation began, Bhairav's voice was strangely calm, as though his confession was a release rather than a burden. He told the officers about the whispers he had heard just days before the massacre. The village panchayat elections were approaching, and some men had mocked him, saying that this time a Rajput woman would become a village leader. Those words struck him like daggers, for in the entire village the only Rajput woman eligible was his wife, Kajod Bai. To him, their laughter hinted at something more. A scandal, a betrayal. He began to suspect that his wife had been unfaithful, that the children he raised might not even be his own. Night after night he confronted Kajod Bai, demanding the truth. She denied it every time, swearing she had been faithful, begging him to stop his madness. But suspicion is a disease that corrodes the mind. To Bhairav, every denial sounded like a lie. Finally, on the night before the murders, in the heat of yet another argument, Kajod Bai admitted something she should never have confessed. Out of exhaustion, anger, or perhaps a desperate attempt to end the torment, she told him she had feelings for another man, a villager named Bhojna Gurjar. That confession shattered whatever sanity Bhairav had left. The following day, while Kajod Bai repaired a wall outside their home, Bhairav appeared with his sword. Without hesitation, he struck her, severing her head from her body in a single blow. His children, playing nearby, froze in terror. One by one, he turned to them, slaughtering each as if they were extensions of his betrayal. 14-year-old Nankunwar, 8-year-old Nathu, 2-year-old Raj Bahadur, none were spared. Even when his daughter Hansa cried out, clinging to life, he kept swinging until she too lay silent. Little Manraj tried to escape toward the hand pump, but Bhairav chased him down and cut him apart. Not even the innocence of childhood could stop the storm of his rage. When the bloodlust subsided, Bhairav stood among the corpses of the very people who once called him husband and father. His sword dripped with the proof of his madness. He walked to the police station, not to hide, but almost as if demanding the world witness his justice. For him, it wasn't a crime, it was punishment. But for everyone else, it was an unforgivable act of brutality. The case moved swiftly through the courts. First, the Bundi Sessions Court sentenced him to death. Then the Rajasthan High Court upheld it. Even the Supreme Court, the last hope of reprieve, rejected his appeal. In August 1994, Bhairav Singh was hanged until death, ending the life of a man who allowed suspicion to consume his soul. This case left the entire nation shaken. How could mistrust grow into such monstrous violence? How could a husband become the executioner of his own children? Perhaps the cruelest truth is that suspicion, once planted, rarely dies quietly. It festers, it poisons, it blinds. Bhairav believed he was punishing betrayal, but in truth he was punishing himself, destroying everything he once loved. The lesson remains bitterly clear. Even the strongest relationships collapse when trust is broken. But here's the question. Was Bhairav driven only by jealousy? Or was there a deeper madness hiding in his mind all along? Something that would have surfaced no matter what. The human heart is a strange battlefield. In Pune, Rakesh once believed love could conquer every obstacle. Family opposition, social norms, even the distance of years. Yet that same love, when mixed with frustration and unmet expectations, became the reason he strangled the very woman he had once promised to protect. In Rajasthan, Bhairav Singh's tale was darker still. His mistrust and jealousy, fueled by whispers and pride, transformed him into a monster capable of killing his wife and 5 innocent children. 2 different men, 2 different times, but the shadows in their hearts tell us a similar truth. When emotions turn into poison, even love and family cannot survive. As chilling as these crimes were, they did not happen overnight. In both stories, the seeds were planted long before blood was spilled. For Rakesh, the seed was his inability to handle the weight of responsibility, torn between his father's needs and his wife's demands. For Bhairav, the seed was suspicion, a creeping vine that wrapped around his mind until it strangled his ability to think clearly. The real terror lies not in the murders themselves, but in how ordinary emotions, anger, jealousy, mistrust, slowly morphed into unstoppable forces of destruction. When police officers caught Rakesh in Pune, it was not just vigilance that saved them from mystery. It was fate itself, almost as if the city demanded justice for Babita. Had that patrol not noticed the bulging sack, perhaps her murder would have been hidden forever. And in Rajasthan, the sight of Bhairav walking into a police station with a dripping sword was not only shocking, but symbolic. It showed that sometimes killers carry their guilt like a banner, unable to live with the weight of silence. These cases remind us that crime is rarely neat or clever. More often it is messy, reckless, and born out of emotions gone wild. But what do these tragedies mean for the rest of us? They tell us that unchecked emotions are more dangerous than any weapon. A sword may end 6 lives in minutes, but suspicion sharpened in the mind can end lives long before the blade falls. Anger may erupt in a single evening, but its echoes can haunt generations. Rakesh and Bhairav were not strangers from distant lands. They were husbands, fathers, neighbors. If men like them could turn into killers, then what safeguards do we truly have against the demons of our own emotions? The courts did their part. Rakesh confessed, and his punishment is now being decided. Bhairav was hanged, his body buried under the weight of his own crimes. Justice was served, but can justice ever erase the scars left behind? Babita's son, who watched his mother die, will carry that nightmare forever. The villagers who saw Kajod Bai and her children butchered will never again trust silence in the night. Legal systems can punish the guilty, but they cannot bring back what was lost. And perhaps that is why these stories sting so deeply. They remind us of the irreversible cost of human weakness. What makes these cases unforgettable is not only the violence, but the helplessness of those caught in it. Babita's young son, a silent witness to his mother's murder. Ratnabai begging for her niece's life while Bhairav swung his sword without mercy. These images linger because they ask us uncomfortable questions. When faced with rage, jealousy, or betrayal, do we have the strength to step back? Or are we all just one broken moment away from committing the unthinkable? These are not just crimes from the past, they are warnings etched into the present. In both stories, love and family, which should have been shields of safety, became weapons of destruction. Rakesh's love story ended with a body in a sack. Bhairav's family bond ended with children bleeding in the dust. The lesson is brutal yet clear. Relationships cannot survive without trust, patience, and restraint. Love alone is not enough. Responsibility must balance it. Faith must guard it. And when those things crumble, what remains is not love, but obsession, jealousy, and rage. The responsibility does not lie only with the killers. Families, neighbors, and communities also hold a role. Had Rakesh and Babita received guidance, perhaps their broken marriages could have healed differently. Had Bhairav been counseled, perhaps suspicion could have been untangled before it turned deadly. Society often ignores emotional struggles until they explode. These tragedies urge us to break that silence, to speak when we see danger, to intervene before anger becomes a weapon. Because sometimes prevention is the only real justice. As we reflect on these two horrifying cases, we see the thin line between devotion and destruction. Love can build a life, but it can also destroy it. Suspicion can protect, but it can also consume. Every human emotion carries two faces, the nurturing and the deadly. Which face we choose depends not on fate, but on our ability to control ourselves. That is the true warning these stories leave behind. that the most terrifying killer does not always live outside, it often hides within. And so we end with a question that lingers like an echo in the night. If love can turn into hate and trust into suspicion, then how do we truly know when a relationship is worth saving and when it is leading us toward ruin?